Today I have a very special guest. This guy, not only is he a comedian, but he is a doctor. That is crazy. A doctor of psychology and neuroscience, correct?
Kinda, yeah. I mean, it's the same thing.
I'm here, I'm there, I'm everywhere. Blues, women, and blues. I'm here, I'm there, I'm everywhere. I'm an asshole.
The story kind of plays into this, but how long have you been on comedy? Since 2009?
I started in San Francisco. I was living there, working in a field that I didn't quite care for, and I had always wanted to be a comedian my whole life, but I kept putting it off. I don't know why. I had different reasons. If I backtrack a little bit, I'll tell you, I went to college in Austin, Texas.
Okay.
So I'm not from Texas, but I ended up here, and I went to college here. And the entire time throughout my college years, I remember wanting to be a stand-up comedian. That's something I really wanted to do. I love comedy. I was a funny person. People would say, "Hey, you should try comedy." I'm like, "Yeah, I should." But I was focused. I was as focused as I could be, having ADHD. But I was focused on getting out of college. So a comedy club opened up in Austin, the Velveeta Room, on 6th Street.
Here it is, right here. They opened up, and this was the stand-up venue of Austin, of downtown.
They opened up, and I started hanging out there, and the comedians that formed in the early days would encourage me. I'd say, "Hey, when are you going to get up? When are you going to do something? You do a set?" And I just didn't feel ready. I didn't have any idea what I would talk about.
So you would just hang around the comedy club?
I was a comedy fan. Every comedian starts out as a comedy fan.
Yeah.
So I would hang out and watch the shows and stuff. But and I would be encouraged, which was kind of nice. That the comics I would talk to would encourage me to get on stage. But I wasn't ready. And for some reason, something inside me told me I wasn't ready. And I didn't think I had anything to talk about if I got on stage. I thought that I had this misconception that you had to step on stage with all your material already prepared and well written and so forth. But how do you get to that point? You got to get on stage first.
Yeah.
So that was the thing that was missing for me. So I pushed it, and then I moved a couple times. Ended up getting accepted into graduate school because I got a degree in psychology from UT. And then I went to graduate school, and then I got a PhD, and then I got a job, and then so this progression of events in my life just kept postponing my desire to be a comedian, but I never left it. I'd always tell people at every stage of my life, I was like, yeah, one of these days I want to try stand-up comedy, And then I got to San Francisco, and I was working at a job I didn't really care for. And one day I was walking down the street in San Francisco, a friend of mine, after work, we were walking, and we pass a sign that says, like stand-up comedy night or open mic night or something like that. And she turns to me, she says, didn't you always say you wanted to be a comedian? I said, yeah. And he's like, well, why don't you give it a shot? And I couldn't figure out a reason to say no. And so got on stage, started performing, and I was immediately hooked. And I tell you, never postpone your dreams. Because as soon as I started doing it, I was kicking myself. I was like, why didn't I do this back in Austin in the Velveeta Room when things were ripe? When I was younger. And
you went that first time where you didn't prepare anything.
I think I had a couple of ideas in my head, and they were probably pretty bad, and they were probably based on comedy that I'd seen on TV. And so I think I went in on that mindset, like try to, do my version of that stuff. I don't remember any of it doing very well. I did get some laughs, but I got a solid rush.
Yeah.
And that was the thing. And I realized from that point forward, like I just wanted to do that. I wanted to be a comedian, and I started focusing heavily on doing comedy. And so I started late. The best time to start comedy is like when you're 15, 16.
Yes.
I mean, honestly, it really is. Look at Chris Rock. Look at all these other
like
people.
Chappelle.
Started young. The second best time is as soon as you can. You know what I mean? Like I can't go back in time and tell my teenage self, look, you got to start writing down these jokes. You got to form an act. You got to develop a personality. But so what? I was a little late to the game. Big deal. I mean, Roseanne started late. Rodney Dangerfield started late. it's encouraging that anybody can get on a comedy stage and just do it. So I decided that I would do it. I would put effort into it. I loved it. I loved it more than anything else I was doing. I loved it more than that job I had. I lost that job about a month after becoming a comedian.
I got fired today. I'm dead serious.
And part of it was because I wanted to do comedy every night. You know, he's like, boss is like, hey, I need you to stay late for this. I'm like, oh, you know what? I've got an open mic that I'm promised I'm going to get 5-minute set, and I need to bail. You know.
Yeah.
And it really was. It was your passions become your commitment. And I was never really committed to what I was doing to support myself at that time. In fact, I really didn't like it. Not that comedy was presenting a better option,
right.
but it was definitely something I was really passionate about. So I decided to pursue it, and I started doing it on a regular basis all around San Francisco.
That's crazy. And what's great about that is, like you said, you started late, and you were already established with a job, a career, doctorate, everything. And it's kind of fun that you're saying, like, this wasn't bringing me joy. I followed the path that they wanted me to follow, or I set, but the true path was over here.
Right.
And that's great. And yeah, I started late too. I started comedy when I was 36, I think. And yeah, it's harder. Like, I see these young bucks coming up, and I'm just like, man, all that wasted time. But I was afraid. It was pure fear of getting on the stage. I was going to ask, the first time you went up, were you nervous, or had you been doing?
I might have been a little nervous. I used to. I hadn't had many public speaking appearances in my life. A couple occasions where I was asked to like give a toast to a crowd, or something like that, or say a few words at a this or a that, and I would be over. I would get flushed red, So I was the nerves would kick in. But I don't know that I was necessarily prohibitively nervous that first time. I kind of went out, and maybe I used the nerves in my favor. I don't remember my first set very well. I didn't have a camera on. I didn't record it. My second set is the one that I have a camera on. I'm like recording, and then I just feel like an old pro. I don't remember how nervous I was, but it was awkward. It was awkward, but it was comfortable. I started to pursue it and care more about that than other responsibilities that I had, and it became my source of joy. And then, of course, when I became unemployed, I had to figure out. You think San Francisco is expensive now? I mean, it was pretty expensive when I was living there. I was in a struggling financial position, and I realized though that what the choices I had made in trying to fit myself into a certain category were not paying off, and if they're not going to pay off anyway, I might as well go broke doing something fun. I might as well go bankrupt trying to be a comedian. I didn't go bankrupt, but I did go broke.
I was going to say, you've done pretty well, actually. It actually worked out for you. So
you never know where opportunities are going to arise, So I started doing comedy, and I did it for a couple of years, and that was a difficult period of my life, but I was developing my skills on stage, my humor, my presence, and it wasn't always great. I mean, obviously we go through ups and downs. I tried doing comedy as a psychologist, I'm like, hey, everybody, I'm a psychologist. You ever hear the one about the behavioralist and the, what I mean? Like, nobody cares. That's people expect that I'm going to do comedy about psychology sometimes, and then they see me. It's like all this guy did was dick jokes and talk about, But, I always try to make people laugh. And if I can't make you laugh by talking about psychology, then I'm going to make you laugh by talking about something else. I only call myself Dr. Brian King on stage as it sort of distinguishes me from other comedians. But it's not like I'm up there talking about psychology or anything that I'm educated in. It took a while. But then eventually I got on the radar of some public speaking bookers. We hear you're a comedian, but you also have a PhD. Is that right? And I was like, yeah. And so they said, well, would you like to do a series of seminars, the public speaking gigs? And that was like a real eye opener for me. I was like, wait a minute, I could make a living utilizing my degree in psychology, but also trying to make it entertaining. I hooked up with this agency, and they started sending me around various cities to try it out. I loved it. I got hooked, and my most expensive bill was my rent in San Francisco. And I told them, I said, look, if you can fill, my calendar, if you can give me, keep me engaged enough, I'll live on the road. I'll do do as many gigs as you can give me, and I will do them and knock them out. I gave up my apartment. I put everything in storage and gave up my apartment and committed to life on the road for a year. In doing that, not only did I earn some money while I was traveling, because that's, the whole point, right? I was working, but also I wasn't paying money on rent. And so having been relieved of that really helped me a great deal in being able to get myself out of that financial situation that I'd gotten into before.
How many years in when you started doing that?
How many years into comedy?
Yeah.
Maybe like 1 or 2, maybe.
Wow, that is impressive.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. I mean, well, remember, I wasn't being booked because of my comedy. I mean, I wasn't. I was. They liked that I was a comedian, but it was. I'm a psychologist, and so they needed somebody with that. I have to have a PhD. So it wasn't like I just went from open micing to touring the country. And it was like that, but it wasn't. I wasn't touring the Improv.
Yeah, but it would have taught you so much. That's what I was thinking.
It really did.
Time on stage.
It really did. I consider every speaking gig as an opportunity, as another stage time opportunity, regardless of what it is. I do some corporate event, or I do this or that or whatever. I mean, it's all public speaking, and it all helps you fine tune whatever it is in our brain. It helps us to communicate and helps us think on the fly and be funny. And in all, of course, the various comedy club exposures that I got as I was traveling too. I mean, I would book as many comedy club gigs, or even like one-nighters, or do open mics wherever I could, and I managed to really just kind of get around a whole lot.
Yeah. And what's impressive is there's a video online on your YouTube channel, which I think is just Dr. Brian King.
Yeah, Dr. Brian King.
Definitely go check this out. But you do a set that's 7 minutes of crowd work, and then you're like, well, I guess I should probably do a joke. But the crowd work is so good that you're just layering joke on joke on joke, and you're hitting on the ladies. Like, I was like, oh, that's smooth. But it's really, really good in the sense that, like, I feel like you're very confident on stage, like you've done it so much, and you're just ready to talk to the crowd. So
I love crowd work. I love to riff. I don't like the problem with having ADD is that it's hard for me to write. Do
you medicate for it, or
no?
Okay.
And it's hard for me to remember too. Like I remember in the early days, I would try to write jokes, and I would write, oh, this is a good idea. I'm gonna put that down, And then I would come to the stage with a set list, And it was a struggle to even look at the set list. You know what I mean? Like I would forget that I had it. I would just start rambling and start talking, and I would get it out. And finally, I kind of abandoned that. I still write jokes and I remember them, but that's because I use them repeatedly. Like the more you say something, the more it just sticks in your head and comes out. But yeah, I really like riffing. I really like crowd work. And one of the problems with crowd work is that you cannot. It's very difficult to sell that to club bookers. Like if I were to come in to this club and audition or whatever, I'd say, I come up here and I just do a whole riffing set. I might get a lot of laughs, but can I do that every night with every crowd? That's a hard thing for a booker. And so, it's nice to have those pre-written jokes in your pocket. And so I have a few, things that I usually say. And I also hate my material too. Even thinking about those jokes, I'm like, I gotta write new stuff.
That's just every comedian. Every comedian hates their material. Yeah. Like at first you love it, and then you hate it, and then you hate it more, then you love it. So you go back and forth on it always. So
you spend all this time working it out. As I go to this show, and I'm just refining it and modifying it and getting used to it. And then it just sits there in your brain for when you need it. But I envy people who can write really well-crafted jokes and remember them and tell them and get good response. I have a lot of friends that I envy because that is, in my opinion, a demonstration of disciplined writing. And they can show a clip, say, hey, this is my set, these are some jokes, and that'll get them a writing job on a TV show. Riffing is a little different, but in the modern age, who knows, more unscripted, entertainment is out there. So there might be other opportunities, but
You can tell that you're very comfortable in it.
You know,
and
the key to that.
What's that?
The key to that. Don't care.
Yeah.
It really is. It really is. It's a hard state of mind to get into, but once you can, try. It's like people talk about meditation. It's a meditative state. It's once you can get into that mindset where I'm just going to free flow and trust that whatever comes out of my mouth is something good and something funny. If you'll chase the laugh too, because if I'm riffing, and I'm interacting with people in the audience or whatever, and it's not going anywhere, well then I could go into my material, which I don't like, or I could make a joke about the fact that it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And so
very self-deprecating.
Yeah,
I noticed that too. Yeah. You were very willing to make fun of yourself at any moment. With the Zak Sprung thing, which our friend Zak Sprung passed away, and the doctor did a moment on the stage, an excellent set actually, which you can watch online. It's awesome. But I remembered it because you came up and you're like, I'm his gay lover.
Yeah.
And I lost it when I was watching that. And I was like, is he really saying this? And the fact that you shaved your hair into a mohawk and went the whole...
Some of you who knew Zach well, you might be feeling a little deja vu right now. I am Zach's secret gay lover. And you know what they say about couples, right? After they spend a lot of time together, they start to look like each other, right?
But did you make up most of that set on stage?
100% of that was made up on the set, stage. Now, here's the thing about that. I had the idea to shave my head like Zach did. Zach had a mohawk, for those people who remember him or don't know him. Zach had a mohawk, and he also had one of those handlebar mustaches, I had just come off of a camping trip, and so my hair was a little bit, a little bit longer than I normally have. So I was going to shave anyway. I usually keep my hair on my head pretty low and keep my beard pretty low. And I asked my family, my wife and my kid, is like, would you guys mind if Dad looks a little silly for a couple of days, because I had this idea to do it, and I wasn't real committed to the idea. It was literally the only thing the only idea that stayed in my head, So I'll think about Zach, right? And I'll think about what he meant to me as a friend and a comedian, and what thoughts come around that. And nothing really was coming up all that more. Nothing was pushing the thought of shaving my head out of my mind. I was like, what can I say about Zach? What can I talk about Zach? It's like, well, I could shave my head. And that. So about a couple hours before that show, I just did it. I committed to it, and so I had a little help. My wife and my kid both helped shave me down to look like Zach. And now the thing about that, right? So that's a prop. I mean, I have I have a prop. I've made my head into a prop basically, and I did look kind of like Zach because I'm a big guy. He was a bigger guy. I had a Bucky shirt on. He wore Bucky shirts all the time. I come out on stage. I had no idea what it was going to say about the fact that I looked like Zach. But then it just starts coming forth, before I got to the gig, I was thinking, well, maybe I could say I'm his ex-lover or something like that, or that I'm emulating him or trying to take over his spot in the comedy scene, And I think all of that came out a little bit, But there was a couple of strokes of genius. When I look at that video, I'm like, oh man, I don't know where I pulled that out of, but that was brilliant.
Zach in the sack is what I used to call him. Zach taking it from the back. I like to grab that mohawk, ride that little hedgehog, you know what I mean? Just really get in there and plow that fucking Albuquerque turkey.
And there was a part about me describing us as being gay lovers, and I said something about I called him Old Zach Attack or something like that.
Zach from the back.
And then that pops into my head as I'm saying Zach Attack, and I'm like, oh my God, Zach from the back. That's brilliant, And then I had another moment where I remembered he was from Albuquerque, and there was something that I was watching the movie Free Guy a while ago. Taika Waititi is in it. Ryan Reynolds is in it. Taika Waititi uses this line about Albuquerque turkey, and that just stuck in my head as Albuquerque rhymes with turkey. And I just remember, imagining having anal sex with Zach. I don't really want to imagine it again. And thinking of him as the Albuquerque turkey, and they're like stuffing the Albuquerque turkey. It was just like as I had that thought on stage. It just pops in your head, out the mouth, And as I said it, I'm like, oh my God, that is brilliant. That is either going to greatly offend his family or make everyone in the room just die laughing. And thankfully, it was the other result.
Dude, it was such a big laugh too, and it was also pressure reliever because so many people were sad at the time because it was out of nowhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That we lost him, and he meant so much to this comedy community here. He did so much for everyone. It was nice to have that because you really relieved the pressure in the room. And then it was just a great. And
I was really affected by his passing too. I mean, I hope that came across in the set. I mean, it wasn't just I'm going to make a bunch of jokes. It was cathartic to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think it was one of the best things I've seen in the last year or two. And for the community to come together in DFW for the comics, just to gather around that, and say, hey, we're going to pay honor and tribute to our friend. I want to kind of talk about how you met him in the sense of you ended up in DFW from your traveling all around. How did that happen that you ended up here?
Well, so I told you I lived on the road for a year, right, early in my career. After that, I decided to move to Los Angeles, settle down, If you're a comedian and you want to make any kind of success in that role, you have to either at some point move to New York or LA. That's just a thing. Now, I was living in San Francisco when I started. My stuff was in storage. LA was an easier move. It just made a lot more sense. The weather's better as well. Yeah. So I moved down to LA. Got a friend of mine in a room wanted to move down around the same time, so we decided to be roommates. And I started living there. And I lived there for about 3 years, fully intended to give it my all. I really wanted to Zak Sprung that place. I was hitting all the shows I could. I was doing everything I could. However, I still needed to make an income. That life doesn't provide an income. So of course, I'm not going to say no when the company calls and says, "Do you want to do these speaking gigs and so forth?" I would continue to do the speaking gigs while I was living in LA, trying to be an actor or a comedian or whatever it is that I'm going to do. And as I continued to do them, I realized I really just love the road. I love being out there, and I love doing these speaking gigs. And in doing them, it would take me 3, maybe 4 months out of the year, not in LA. I would get a call or an email from one of my profiles. I'm like, hey, we think you'd be great for this role. Are you able to come in to audition? I'm like, no, I'm in Nebraska, doing a thing. And so after a while, I just realized, I'm not actually giving LA what it requires for me, because you got to be present. You have to be present to be even considered for things. So I was willing to leave LA, and right around the same time, I met a girl who attended one of my talks in Florida, and we had gotten to know each other pretty well, and there was a little bit of a mutual attraction there. And she was looking to leave Florida, and she was a traveling professional as well. So we were both talking one day about the difficulties in having a relationship when your income takes you on the road, and it's like, wouldn't it be great to just travel together? And I said, yes, it would be. Let's do that. And so I decided, she was like, yeah, I'm on board. And so because normally I would travel with a friend to kind of take care of things. She was living in Colorado at the time. I was still in LA. She flew to LA, helped me pack up my stuff so that it would go back into storage. And then we took a nice long road trip over to Florida where we packed up all of her stuff and put it in storage and sold her house. I didn't own my apartment in LA, but she owned a place in Florida. So we sold the house, we packed up all our stuff, and our stuff went into storage. And that's where it remained for actually until 3 months ago. Yeah. All right. So we lived on the road for about 6, 7 years.
Wow.
So now the pandemic happened, when the pandemic happened, it canceled everything, right? It canceled all the gigs, canceled the speaking, canceled everything. Now, the thing people don't realize is that when I do these gigs, I get hotel rooms, and so it's not like I'm camping in my car or driving around. Some comedians do. They camp in their car, they couch surf or whatever. But when those gigs were pulled out from under me, now I no longer have like most of my hotel rooms paid for the year, and so I have to figure out what to do because I also don't have any income.
When they tell you to shelter at home and you don't have a home, what the hell do you do?
So it's tough to figure out where to live, but the flip side of that is that because we weren't committed to a place, we could technically live anywhere. We could choose based on whatever we wanted to whatever circumstances. And so we spent a couple of weeks temporarily, doing what we could do, paying attention to how the pandemic played out and which places looked like they'd be more hospitable than others.
Right.
Texas was the best place. I mean, it was the most. We came to Dallas. I lived in Austin when I was younger. I went to UT. I love Texas, always have, but I never thought I would move back. And the pandemic brought me back, and I'm just happy to be here.
Texas was the most open place that we were willing to move to.
Right.
South Dakota was open because they never closed at all. But I didn't want to move to South Dakota. I have no ties there, no reason to move there. Also, Texas was the first place to start doing comedy shows again.
Yeah, actually, we were the first club that started doing shows here. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing,
I think that's a great thing. No, I think that's a great thing. Somebody's got to be first. Yeah. And honestly, it's that first person who shows the rest of the world that we can do it still.
It was crazy. We were open at like 10%.
Yeah.
So it was like 30 tables, if even that we could do. You know what I mean?
We moved here temporarily during the pandemic, and I, being restless, I'm gonna take advantage of what's going on, and so I saw postings about open mics and stuff. The first open mic I went to in Texas was this bar called Hat Tricks, which we all are familiar with, and I wouldn't say it was a good open mic. But I knew, so I'm seasoned enough in comedy, and I've been to enough comedy scenes in the country to know that if you're new in town, you go to an open mic, and other comedians, and regardless of what's there, whether it's an audience or not, the other comedians will recognize in you that there's a little bit of experience, So I just went in. I signed up for a set. I did a set. After my set, immediately Zach is coming up to me. He's like, "Hey man, how long have you been doing comedy? It's obvious you're not like a fresh open micer." And George and other people, And so I knew that was a quick way to establish some connections. And I met those guys, and we became friends and worked together a lot throughout the pandemic.
It's been okay. The online thing's really big as well with it. The Zoom and stuff. I haven't focused so much on that. Been more in person and everything, but. That has really exploded as well as the whole Zoom scene with comedy and everything as well. I think it's going to make an impact where it sort of changes things forever, possibly, for at least a long time, that's for sure.
And I would not have survived the pandemic as well as I did if it wasn't for people like Zach and George giving me something to do. I mean, really, I was terribly restless and unproductive during the pandemic. I hadn't had a job in over 10 years. I mean, touring the country as a comedian / public speaker, that's not a job. Those are gigs.
Yeah.
Once things started opening in the world, and I had the opportunity to go back on the road and do what I normally do for income. Oh man, that was such a relief. it was like, oh my God, I don't know how much more of this I can endure. 2 years sitting out was a lot, and so I got back on the road, and it was not full time. It was like a smaller tour, less attendance, that kind of stuff. I was so grateful to be able to do it, and then my in the time between meeting my now wife and today, I had a kid, and she had a kid. I just helped. And so now we have a child, right? And when we first had the kid, people were like, hey, aren't you going to settle down somewhere? Where are you going to settle down? I was like, no, we don't need to settle down, and we didn't. We took her on the road. She traveled fine. There's no problem. But once she got to school age, I knew that we would have to settle somewhere because there's just some aspects of life that I can't give her as we're moving from place to place all the time. Right. I want her to have a little bit of exposure to that. So we started thinking about where do we want to settle, because we kind of knew last year would be the last real full touring year with the whole family. We started thinking, where do we want to settle? What feels right? And there's a list of cities that we could have gone to and really appreciated, but we would all, we wanted to go here, whatever. And for some reason, Dallas just kept overpowering those cities. Like, we really liked it here. There's a lot of opportunities here. A couple months ago, it's literally like 2 months ago, we settled in. We arranged for all of our storage units to be unloaded, brought here, and now I guess I live here.
Yeah. Well, welcome to Dallas.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm here, I'm there, I'm everywhere. Blues, women, and booze. I'm here, I'm there, I'm everywhere. I'm an asshole, I'm